What is it about words on a page that frightens kings, dictators, and empires? In part 1, we uncovered some of them. A book banned for exposing totalitarian control, and another banned for enraging governments and religious leaders alike. But what if I told you we left out the most shocking? From a novel condemned for attacking capitalism to a classic, the Nazis set aflame in public squares. Welcome to part 2 of every banned book that changed history explained. Fahrenheit 451, Ray Bradbury. The irony of Fahrenheit 451 is almost unbelievable. A book about censorship, banned for being too dangerous to read. Published in 1953, Ray Bradbury imagined a future where firemen don't put out fires, they burned books. It was a warning about how fear, comfort, and control could erase free thought. But the warning itself scared people. In the United States, the novel was challenged in schools and libraries for profanity, for questioning authority, and for painting a future where knowledge was forbidden. Some versions of the book were even censored themselves. Words like hell and damn quietly removed so it could appear safer for students. And yet, every time it was banned, the message hit harder. Readers saw their own governments in its pages. Ironically, a book about censorship became the ultimate proof that censorship never truly works. But this next book wasn't banned for imagination. It was banned for tearing into the American dream itself. The Grapes of Wrath, John Steinbeck. Published in 1939, John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath told the story of desperate families fleeing the Dust Bowl in search of survival. It was raw, painful, and brutally honest about the struggles of America's poor. That honesty is exactly why it was banned. In states like California and Oklahoma, the novel was seen as a direct attack on landowners and the capitalist system. Libraries refused to stock it. Politicians called it propaganda. In Kern County, California, the very place the story was set, officials went so far as to ban the book outright, calling Steinbeck a liar for exposing the suffering of migrant workers. Every effort to ban it only cemented its place as one of America's defining novels. The Grapes of Wrath won the Pulitzer Prize, fueled labor rights movements, and forced readers to confront the darker side of the American dream. Even banned, it sparked debates in Congress and shifted public opinion toward greater perfections for workers. And while Steinbeck was accused of being un-American, the next author was accused of something even more dangerous, mocking war itself. Catch-22, Joseph Heller. When Joseph Heller released Catch-22 in 1961, it didn't read like the heroic war stories people were used to. Instead, it painted the military as absurd, corrupt, and endlessly trapped in its own contradictions. The very phrase Catch-22 came to mean a situation so twisted you could never escape. That was exactly why the book was banned. In places like the United States and Australia, school boards pulled it from shelves for being anti-war and anti-American. Its sharp satire, profanity, and willingness to portray soldiers as human, scared, selfish, sometimes foolish, terrified leaders who needed war to look noble. And instead of silencing it, censorship turned Catch-22 into a cultural phenomenon. Veterans recognized their own struggles in its pages. Students embraced its rebellious spirit, and the phrase itself entered everyday language, proving that censorship couldn't silence Heller's message. If Catch-22 mocked the machinery of war, the next book was even more dangerous, because it exposed a revolution that empires didn't want the world to read about. Dr. Zhivago, Boris Pasternak. In 1957, Boris Pasternak's Dr. Zhivago was banned in the Soviet Union before it was even published. The reason? It dared to show the Russian Revolution not as a glorious victory, but as a time of chaos, suffering, and broken lives. Pasternak's novel followed Yuri Zhivago, a poet and doctor torn apart by war, politics, and love. A story that clashed directly with the Soviet narrative of strength and progress. The authorities blocked its publication, yet copies were smuggled out of the country and published in Italy, then secretly translated back into Russian and distributed by Western intelligence agencies. It became a weapon in the cultural Cold War, a novel used to challenge Soviet propaganda. When Pasternak was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1958, the Soviet government forced him to decline it. They made him a traitor, shamed him in the press, and isolated him until his death. But the attempt to block it only made the novel more influential worldwide. And if this novel rattled an empire, the next one was banned for something even stranger. It tried to give voice to Satan himself. The Satanic Bible, Anton LaVey. When Anton LaVey published the Satanic Bible in 1969, it was less about literal worship and more about questioning authority, tradition, and organized institutions. But to many countries, that was even more dangerous. The book openly challenged Christian morality, promoted radical individualism, and dared to claim that rebellion was a virtue. Almost immediately, governments moved moved to ban it. South Africa outlawed it under apartheid censorship laws. Several European nations restricted its sale, calling it a threat to public morals. Even in the United States, schools and community groups campaigned against it, arguing that it could negatively influence young readers. For decades, it was one of the most challenged books in libraries, and every attempt to restrict it only fed its reputation as a symbol of rebellion. The Satanic Bible became a counterculture icon, inspiring rock musicians, artists, and outcasts who felt suffocated by mainstream society. It turned LaVey into a symbol of defiance, whether people agreed with him or not. If the Satanic Bible was banned for mocking morality, the next book was even more dangerous. It exposed the cruelty of a system millions of people were forced to live under. One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. When One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich was first published in 1962, it shocked readers inside the Soviet Union. For the first time, a novel openly described life inside Stalin's labor camps. The hunger, the freezing cold, the endless labor that tested the limits of human endurance. Alexander Solzhenitsyn didn't write about heroes or victories. He wrote about survival. At first, the book slipped through because Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev allowed it during his brief period of reform. But once political winds shifted, it became too dangerous. By the 1970s, Solzhenitsyn's work had been banned, seized, and secretly circulated only as underground manuscripts. He was harassed, arrested, and eventually forced into exile. It endured quietly, passed hand to hand, until the world knew the truth. It gave the world its first real glimpse into the Gulag system, exposing truths the Soviet government wanted buried forever. For readers, it proved that one ordinary man's story could pierce through an empire's wall of silence. If this book revealed the hidden prisons of the Soviet Union, the next one would be banned much closer to home, inside American schools. The Color Purple, Alice Walker. Alice Walker's The Color Purple, published in 1982, won both the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award. But alongside its praise came a wave of censorship. The novel told the story of African American women in the rural South, addressing issues of race, gender, and violence with unflinching honesty. In schools across the United States, it was one of the most frequently challenged books of the 1980s and 1990s. Parents and school boards argued that its themes of sexuality, violence, and racial injustice were too explicit for students. Some libraries pulled it from their shelves entirely, sparking heated debates about who gets to decide what young people can read. But the pushback made it impossible to ignore in American culture. The Color Purple became a classic of modern literature, adapted into an Oscar-winning film and later a Broadway musical. Its characters gave voice to struggles that had long been silenced, forcing uncomfortable conversations about America's past and present. If this novel was banned for showing truths some wanted hidden, the next one was banned for something even stranger. It dared to play God through science. Frankenstein, Mary Shelley. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, first published in 1818, is often remembered as the birth of modern science fiction, but in its own time, it was feared. The story of Victor Frankenstein creating life from death raised questions about science, morality, and humanity's place in the universe. Critics called it dangerous, even blasphemous. Some religious leaders condemned it as disrespectful to faith, claiming it encouraged readers to challenge divine creation. In parts of Europe, the novel was restricted or condemned for promoting ideas that seemed to trespass on sacred ground. Over time, it was challenged in schools for its dark themes and unsettling imagery, viewed as too disturbing for young readers. Rather than vanishing, it laid the foundation for modern science fiction. It forced readers to think about responsibility, ambition, and the price of unchecked knowledge. 2 centuries later, Frankenstein remains one of the most studied novels in the world, proving that what was once seen as dangerous can become immortal. But while Shelley's book tested science and faith, the next banned book went after something even more powerful: the authority of kings and churches themselves. Candide, Voltaire. Published in 1759, Voltaire's Candide looked like a light-hearted adventure at first glance. But beneath the satire was a ruthless attack on the optimism, religion, and politics of his time. Through absurd misfortunes and biting humor, Voltaire mocked the idea that all is for the best in a world filled with war, corruption, and suffering. The response from authorities was swift. Candide was banned in France for insulting the monarchy and the Catholic Church. It was banned in Switzerland for mocking religion and banned in parts of Italy for spreading immoral ideas. Even when it circulated underground, readers risked punishment for owning a copy. And yet the effort to suppress it made it a rallying cry for free thinkers. Voltaire's wit lived on, proving that laughter could be just as dangerous to power as revolution. If Candide challenged the authority of kings and churches through satire, the next book went even further, and it was burned in the streets by a regime determined to erase it from memory. All Quiet on the Western Front. Eric Maria Remarque. When Erich Maria Remarque published All Quiet on the Western Front in 1929, it shattered the heroic image of war. The novel followed German soldiers in World War I, not as glorious warriors, but as exhausted young men broken by mud, gas, and endless death at the front lines. It was one of the first international bestsellers to show war as meaningless destruction. The impact was immediate, and so was the backlash. In Nazi Germany, the book was branded unpatriotic and degenerate. Copies were banned, seized, and in 1933, thrown into bonfires during the infamous book burnings. The Nazis feared that its honest portrayal of soldiers would weaken their militaristic propaganda, but in the end it survived longer than the ideology that condemned it. It was translated into dozens of languages, adapted into films, and continues to be one of the most powerful anti-war novels ever written. Because if history has shown us anything, it's this. The more you try to silence a book, the louder its voice becomes. Now here's the question for you. Which of these banned books do you think changed history the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you've ever read one of these titles, tell us, how did it impact you? And don't forget, Part 3 might cover the most unexpected banned books yet. Ones almost lost to time. So hit like, tap subscribe, and join us as we uncover the stories they never wanted you to read.